Adriel Bay was found dead in his locked study room, and before the investigation had a direction, someone had already chosen one for us. It started with a call late one rainy night. The city was quiet, the kind of silence that only heavy rain can create. When my phone rang, a senior police official was on the other end. His voice was calm, but there was pressure behind it. He informed me that Adriel Bay, one of the city's most powerful businessmen, had been found dead inside his private study room. The door was locked from the inside, the windows were sealed, and there were no signs of forced entry anywhere in the mansion. His family was out of the country on vacation, and he had been alone in the house that night. They wanted me to take over the case immediately. When I arrived at the mansion, police lights were flashing across the marble driveway, reflecting off the rain-soaked ground. The property had already been sealed, and officers were stationed at every entry point. I was briefed before entering the study. Around midnight, one of Adriel's security supervisors attempted to contact him regarding a scheduled meeting the next morning. After repeated calls went unanswered, they used the master override system to unlock the study door. Adriel Bay was found seated near his desk, a single gunshot wound to his chest. A pistol registered under his name was lying near his right hand. At first glance, the scene suggested suicide. However, something felt off. The chair had not shifted. There were no signs of struggle. The desk was unnaturally clean, almost polished. The positioning of the weapon seemed too deliberate, as if it had been placed rather than dropped. Crime scene technicians carefully bagged the pistol and sent it to forensic for fingerprint analysis, gunshot residue testing, and ballistic comparison. The room was dusted thoroughly, but no foreign fingerprints were recovered. In fact, the study appeared unusually clean, as though someone had wiped it down with intention. While the forensic team continued their work, I inspected the rest of the house. Everything appeared secure except for one detail: the terrace door. It was not properly locked. There were no visible signs of forced entry, but it could have been used by someone who knew the house well. That possibility stayed in my mind, and before leaving, I requested access to Adriel's personal and business documents. Financial disputes and power struggles often reveal more truth than crime scenes do. I spent the entire night reviewing contracts, partnership agreements, and recent business expansions. 3 names repeatedly appeared across major deals: Adriel Bay, Keller, and Marcus Vale. Years ago, the 3 of them had built their business empire together. Over time, however, internal tensions began to surface. Keller had separated from the partnership months earlier after demanding a larger share in a major deal. He claimed he had contributed more and deserved more. Adriel refused. Marcus Vale, on the other hand, had remained close to Adriel. Their relationship extended beyond business. Adriel reportedly trusted him like a brother. The following morning, both Keller and Marcus were called in for questioning. They were interrogated separately. Keller appeared composed and controlled. He admitted there had been disagreements in the past, but dismissed them as normal business conflicts. He claimed he was out of the city on a business trip the night of the murder and provided hotel details to support his alibi. His tone never wavered, and his body language remained steady. Marcus Vale presented a different demeanor. He looked disturbed and emotionally shaken. During questioning, he mentioned that Adriel had recently expressed concerns about feeling threatened by someone close to him. Although he never revealed who that person was, Marcus also revealed an important detail. The night before the murder, all 3 of them had attended a private party hosted by Keller. According to him, the atmosphere was positive, and Keller had seemingly attempted to repair their strained relationship. They drank together and appeared to have resolved old disputes. The interrogations concluded without immediate arrests, however. The next day, the initial forensic report arrived. The fingerprint analysis on the murder weapon was complete. The prints found on the pistol did not match Keller, they matched Marcus Vale. Marcus was immediately taken into custody. When I arrived at the station, he was already handcuffed in a holding cell. He insisted he was innocent and admitted that he had handled the gun before, but claimed he did not fire it. The forensic details raised more questions than answers. Only one clear set of fingerprints was found on the weapon, Marcus's. There were no smudges, no partial prints, no overlapping impressions. It was unusually clean for a firearm involved in a fatal shooting. Ballistic testing confirmed that the bullet recovered from Adriel's body had indeed been fired from that pistol. From the department's perspective, the case seemed straightforward. The murder weapon was registered to the victim, and the fingerprints on it belonged to Marcus. Yet something did not align logically. If Marcus had murdered Adriel and attempted to stage the scene as suicide, why would he meticulously wipe the entire study room but leave his own fingerprints perfectly intact on the weapon? That contradiction troubled me. As I reviewed timelines and movement data, Keller's alibi began to weaken. While hotel records showed he had made a booking outside the city, cell tower data indicated his phone had connected to a tower near Adriel's mansion around the estimated time of death. When confronted, Keller claimed it was a technical routing error. It was possible, but it was not convincing. Then another significant detail surfaced. The day before the murder, all three men had visited a private shooting club. Membership logs and CCTV footage confirmed their presence. Marcus did not own a firearm, so Adriel had lent him his pistol for practice during the session. That same pistol later became the murder weapon. Marcus had handled it openly and without gloves in front of witnesses. His fingerprints would naturally have been present on it from that day. That realization shifted the entire case in my mind. The fingerprints were not planted after the crime. They were planted before it. Whoever committed the murder did not need to force evidence onto the weapon. They simply needed to preserve what was already there. Meanwhile, financial analysis revealed that if both Adriel were dead and Marcus convicted, Keller would gain significant control over shared assets and dormant agreements worth billions. Motive began to solidify. Still, motive without proof is merely suspicion. At this stage, the department was ready to close the case against Marcus. The evidence appeared direct and conclusive. However, the more I examined the details, the more I became convinced that the scene had been engineered days in advance. This was not a crime of impulse or rage. It was calculated, structured, patient, and someone had carefully designed every step before pulling the trigger. I just needed to prove it. By the third day, the department was ready to close the case. The fingerprints were on the gun. The motive could be shaped. Marcus Vale was already sitting in custody. On paper, it looked perfect. But perfect cases disturb me. I requested the full forensic report again and read it slowly. The weapon had only one clear set of fingerprints. Marcus's. No overlapping prints. No partial smudges. That didn't make sense. The gun had been used at a shooting club just a day before, handled by more than one person. Yet only one clean set remained. That meant the weapon wasn't just used, it was prepared. Someone had wiped it carefully, making sure not to disturb the prints that were already there. I shifted my focus to the timeline. The night of the murder, Keller hosted a party. Witnesses confirmed that he and Adriel had a private conversation before the evening ended. They seemed calm, even friendly. A reconciliation, people said. But phone tower data showed Keller's device near Adriel's mansion shortly after midnight. Not moving, not passing by, stationary. The estimated time of death was 12:35 a.m. That wasn't a coincidence. I returned to the mansion and studied the study room again. The door had been locked from inside, windows sealed, no forced entry. It looked impossible until I stepped onto the balcony outside the study. The side elevation of the house made it accessible to someone who knew the structure well. Keller had visited that mansion for years. Inside, the bullet trajectory told its own story. The shot came from slightly above Adriel's seated position. It wasn't self-inflicted. Someone had stood in front of him, and Adriel hadn't resisted, which meant he trusted the person holding the gun. Then I reviewed the partnership agreements once more. Hidden deep in the legal language was a clause stating that if one founding partner died and another was convicted of a serious crime, controlling authority would transfer to the remaining partner. Keller wouldn't just gain leverage, he would gain everything. That was the real motive. Not anger, not revenge. Control. The sequence became clear. At the shooting club, Adriel had handed Marcus his pistol to practice. Keller was present. He knew Marcus's fingerprints were now cleanly placed on that weapon. The next night, after rebuilding trust at the party, Keller asked Adriel if he could borrow the same gun, claiming he was considering getting one for himself and would return it the next day. Adriel agreed. Later that night, Keller went back to the mansion. Adriel opened the door willingly. One close-range shot. Quick, controlled. Keller locked the study from inside, exited through the balcony, wiped the weapon carefully without disturbing Marcus's prints, and left it beside the body. When I called Keller in for one final statement against Marcus, he arrived confident. I casually mentioned the estimated time of death, but I intentionally stated it incorrectly Without hesitation, Keller corrected me. Precisely. That detail had never been released to the public. The moment the words left his mouth, he realized what he had done. The silence in the room said everything. You only correct the time of death if you know the time of death. Officer stepped in moments later. Keller didn't resist. Marcus was released that evening. The fingerprints had not been planted after the murder, they had been planted before it. Keller didn't frame Marcus in panic. He framed him in preparation. Adriel Bay was found dead in his locked study, and before the police could find a single clue, the killer had already chosen who would take the fall.